Hi there and welcome to the guest list. I'm your host, Steve Guest. Really excited for today's podcast. It's somebody that has been put forward as someone that is inspiring and is in a position where we can learn a lot from listening to what they've got to say. So for those that haven't listened to any podcasts previously, this podcast has been born out of Top Bill of the Life of a Recruiter, which is a book I wrote that's done better than expected and has done really well. And what I wanted to do was create something where I could continue to add value, create content, but actually get empowering and inspiring people to speak to. And I put posts out to my network and said, who should I be talking to? Who should be the people that you want to listen to? And that's what's put me and our guest today together. So I'm going to read through the quick bio, and then we'll get them introduced and we'll get chatting. So this person is the director of EAC Consulting Group, following many years working as a top billing recruitment consultant and manager within a market-leading recruitment firm. Alongside the business partner, they've decided to set up on their own and create a consultancy with a real focus on quality and customer experience. Their business, after 4 years, has now become the go-to recruiter for sales and office recruitment within Milton Keynes and the surrounding areas. Alongside this, the business has in excess of 100 Google reviews at a 4.9 star rating and has won awards due to its consultative and service-orientated approach. The person that I'm speaking to today holds a Master in Business Administration, winning the best dissertation in the business school for his paper on the use of artificial intelligence in recruitment branding. He's also a postgraduate diploma in strategic management and leadership, showing their keen interest in both recruitment and management. So I'd like to give a big warm welcome to Harry Alston. Lovely to have you on the show today, Harry.
Morning, Steve, and good to be here, especially after some of the previous guests that I've listened to over the week. You know, some really good people from the recruitment industry and the business world. So, real pleasure.
Good. Well, welcome along. We're going to go straight into it. So, obviously, you were nominated to be on today's show. Why do you feel that you have been nominated? What do you feel that sets you apart, perhaps, from others?
I think really it's probably the success of EAC over kind of the last probably 6 months. Really pre-pandemic, we were very much maybe a business similar to other businesses. We took the pandemic as a real strategic window as our competitors were shutting down branches, putting people on furlough, closing down businesses, and probably not really engaging so much with their clients and their candidates. We saw that as an opportunity to capitalize on that business, reach out to clients, see how they're getting on. There were still quite a few clients kind of hiring at the back end of last year. And I think the foundations we built then have really catapulted us at the start of 2021. We then invested massively into our digital marketing. We won an award last year. We're nominated for 2 awards this year. We've got our Google reviews over 100. So we've got a real focus at the minute on kind of market presence and expanding the foundations we built in 2020, which has seen huge success in 2021 so far. We're massively hiring at the minute, so looking for new people. And I think that's gained us a lot of exposure, which in turn has put me in a position to be put forward for this podcast.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right there. I've obviously spoke to lots of recruitment businesses, lots of recruitment consultants, more so over the last 12 months and during the pandemic, which I think has seen a lot of people insecure, not sure where they're going, not sure where their role is or their position or their business. And I think there's 2 schools of thought. There's the people that will sit there and think or almost feel overwhelmed and not know what to do or where to go or how to react. And then there's the others that say, do you know what, this is a huge window of opportunity where you can grab a bit of market share. If you continue to do what you do and do it well, you can come out bigger and stronger. And it sounds like that's exactly what you've gone and done.
Yeah, 100%. I think most businesses nationally, whether that's recruitment or otherwise, there was a massive concern at the start of the pandemic. And I think people are, myself included, massively concerned by the unknown. And I think it was very much an unknown entity. You know, businesses were having to close, clients were dropping off, you know, placements or deals were dropping out. And you think, right, you know, what's my strategy here? What's my structure? You know, so like many others, initially we went on furlough. We thought, right, okay, let's regroup. Let's have a look at the best way forward. And, you know, upon sitting down, I think we established that we could actually get back to work a lot quicker than other businesses. We could reduce costs by maybe splitting the guys coming in the office or working from home part-time as opposed to full-time, and splitting that furlough. And that time we spend working on a part-time basis, we really focus on that business development approach, that marketing approach, reaching out to clients, seeing how they're getting on. And when we were speaking to these businesses that maybe we hadn't ever really managed to engage with before because they've got a PSL or they're comfortable with their agency, they're saying, look, you know, it's good to hear from you guys because we haven't heard from a recruiter for 3 months. And let's be honest, when does anyone ever say that about a recruiter? You know, so it's great for us. So we saw that maybe even though these clients aren't recruiting now, the business development and the foundations we're building, once things kick off and people want to recoup those losses that they've made in 2020, who are they going to go to? They're going to go to that business that's constantly knocking on their door, you know, that was there throughout a troubling period, wasn't being pushy, but was building relationships when a lot of our local competitors, you know, weren't knocking on that door and were still at home or, you know, not working. So I think that really catapulted us come the start of 2021, where, you know, we know how it's boomed, Steve, especially in March. I think KPMG and the REC did a report saying March was the busiest month for available vacancies for the last 6 years, you know, which is fantastic. But that's allowed us to really capitalize, really gain a large quantity of the market share, like you say. But also, we've got so many jobs at the minute. We've had to hire new heads. We've taken 2 in already this year. We've got another girl starting in May, and we're probably looking for 2 to 3 more people, you know, which is a great indication of how the economy is recovering and how the recruitment industry can really be the backbone of that recovery.
It's a great story, and I think for people listening today, it's a huge motivator as well to show that even in downturns, in times of worry or insecurity, actually it's a time, if you flip your mindset, that you can actually make advances far and above perhaps the people around you and your competitors.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got a question. So you've been at a top performing level as a recruiter, as a manager, and then obviously you've progressed to running your own consultancy. What do you feel sets the top performers, the top billing individuals aside from perhaps your normal run-of-the-mill average recruiter?
I think you've got to, you know, like the old added cliche in recruitment, and we hear it time and time again in interview, I'm sure you do as well, Steve, you know, firstly, you've got to have those foundations, which is emotional intelligence, resilience, and the ability to persuade people. And I think those core skills will firstly make you, you know, a good recruiter. But what makes a top performing recruiter and what makes a great recruiter, I think for me, are probably 2 things. One is proactivity, not waiting for jobs coming in. You know, when you're having a quiet day, getting on that phone, you know, making the business development calls, you know, sending those mail shots, trying to reach new customers through whatever avenue you can, and as creatively as you can. When you've maybe searched all of the job boards for candidates and you've searched LinkedIn, thinking outside, right, okay, how else can I get candidates on board? You know, are there groups that I can link to? You know, what other innovative ways can I get myself, you know, candidates that are very hard to reach? And I think the second thing is understanding return on investment. I think what a lot of good recruiters do is they stop themselves being great recruiters by not understanding where to spend their time and not understanding what clients to spend their time on. You know, we've probably all got examples of that client that, you know, they're maybe on a good fee, they've got a high volume of jobs, but they keep turning your candidates down for interview for this reason or that reason, you know, but you want to stick with them because you see there's the opportunity there, there's a potential. But I think what good recruiters will do, great recruiters will do, is they'll say, right, enough's enough now. You know, clearly, even though the fee sounds great, the volume sounds great, it's not working. My time is better spent elsewhere. And again, that return on investment comes from that time management, how they structure their day. Do they work smart or do they work hard? if they work smart and hard, great. But I'd always take a smart worker over a hard worker because they tend to understand return on investment. And I think those two things, proactivity and return on investment, are key to be a high performing consultant.
Yeah, I love that. I love that summary as well. I think in my experience, certainly from a recruitment perspective, because there's so much KPIs, there's so many elements in which a recruiter is potentially trying to tick off their whiteboard and match the stats, the KPIs and the various areas put onto them. And I think quite often recruiters will work on the fear of missing out. And they feel like they have to fill the vacancy. They have to work with the client. They have to do all they can for everyone and everything. And actually they spread themselves so thin that they end up not doing anything for anyone because they're trying to tick too many boxes. And you cover it nice there. I'm a big advocate of managing time properly and putting a valuation of the time spent in whatever area you're working on. Okay, so your business is growing. You're taking recruiters on. How do you motivate them? How do you get them to be part of a team where you're all heading in the same direction?
I think the key thing for us, and something we're massive on, and people joining the business say, "Wow, you do this a lot," is we do meetings. But again, we try and make those meetings smart. It's not a meeting about a meeting or a post-meeting about the previous meeting. You know, it's very much about, okay, what's the common goal today? What are we trying to achieve as an organisation? How do we all filter into that? And I think what we find from that as a business as well, and I think this is relevant to both sales businesses, recruitment businesses, whoever, is there's a lot of sharing. You know, one of my colleagues might have a job, another colleague, we're in this meeting, they're saying, right, I've got this job, I'm struggling to fill it. Quite often another colleague will say, right, I've got a candidate for that. You know, and it's looking at, right, okay, both of us could make zero because she's got the job but no candidate. He's got the candidate but no job. Or we could split that 50-50 and, you know, really optimize the amount we make. And, you know, I think the majority of our fees within our organization come from sharing. They're a 75-25 split or a 50-50 split because, you know, there's a lot of collaboration within the office. We've tried to get away from that mindset, which I think a lot of sales businesses and recruitment businesses do, is working in silos. You know, you're a 360 recruiter, so you must 360 place. You know, whereas actually, if you collaborate, ultimately, you'll earn a lot more money. And you do it in such a more positive environment. So, you know, those team meetings every morning, you know, whether that be in the office, over Zoom or any kind of network like that, for me, a key to bring the guys together and to get them sharing best practices and get them understanding what other people are working on to see if they can capitalize. I think outside of that as well, to get people to perform and to get people to want to reach that next level, we've always got a career plan in place for our guys as to tangibly how they reach, say, senior consultant or managing consultant or manager. You know, I look at every person in my business at the minute and they know and I know what they need to do to get that pay rise and what they need to do to get that promotion, which, let's be honest, if you're working in recruitment, it's probably about one or two things. It's either the progression or it's going to be about the pay rise. You know, so the way myself and Imran, my business partner, founded the organization was everyone fully aware and transparently understanding how they reach that next step, which has brought some great results.
That's brilliant. And I think quite often it's about leading from the front, isn't it? It's about ensuring that the mission is about all of you. It's not about any one particular person. And I'm from a traditional recruiting background where I was almost told to ring fence my business, ring fence my clients, my candidates, top drawer the best CVs. You don't share, you don't talk to anyone, let alone your colleagues, never mind your competition.
Yeah,
and I think certainly as the recruitment industry is progressing, collaboration is becoming more apparent, even across competition. I think it's so important. Understanding your staff and knowing what motivates them is essential because everybody's different. Okay, so from your perspective, over the course of perhaps building your business and being a recruiter yourself, have there been any kind of big failures or areas where it hasn't worked and you've sat there and had to reassess and think, okay, well, how do I change this? How do I come back from this, that have really made an impact on you?
Yeah, I think 100%. I mean, two that come to mind, and it was probably making the same mistake twice, and call me foolish for doing that. I don't know, but I think one thing that we've done as a business is we've kind of tried to branch out from what we know. We're very good at sales and office recruitment. That's our niche. That's our specialism. That's what myself and Imran do. So it's very easy for us to train and develop people to do that well. Whereas what we've done, firstly, when we created a legal division, was we brought someone in to head up a legal division. And, it certainly wasn't their fault that it didn't work out long term for us. It was the fact that maybe we didn't understand legal. We didn't have that passion for legal. So where maybe in sales and office recruitment, if something goes wrong with a consultant, it's very easy for us to tweak, train, develop, support them. Within the legal remit, it's a lot more difficult. So that was a learning for us, that look, it doesn't mean don't diversify at all. But I suppose what it means to us is, if you're going to diversify, really invest in that sector, really have a bit of a passion for it, because I think when you're on down days, the passion drives you through, doesn't it? Whereas if you don't have that passion and it's a down day, you're like, oh, what am I doing here? And then the second thing was, again, we set up an engineering division, probably whilst we still had the legal going. So, there were two mistakes that were probably made in a very short period of time. But again, we couldn't necessarily support that individual that set up the engineering division as well as we'd like to, because it's not something that we had intimate knowledge on, and it's not something we had a passion for. Whereas our sales and office recruitment division has always succeeded, done really well, got great market share, because we've got a passion for it, because we know it, and because it's very easy to kind of iron out any kinks because of our knowledge within that. So I'd say they were certainly two mistakes that if I went back, I'd have invested that focus into our sales and office recruitment division. And if I look to set up a new division in the future, which, certainly never say never, I would really kind of research, understand it, to give that person the best tools to succeed in that role.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Within that, you mentioned the down days. Now, recruitment is a very kind of up and down vocation. And I think we can all have those days where we come in and we think, oh, we've really got to do this again. I've got to make X amount of calls, or nothing worked. I spent all my time working on that vacancy last week and they haven't turned up today. How do you, as an individual, how do you kind of give yourself that proverbial kick up the backside? Because we all need it from time to time.
Yeah, I think it's understanding what the long-term goal is. And look, that goal, when you start a business and when you're operating within a business, it often remains the same. It might be adjusted a little bit here or adjusted a little bit there, but it's keeping that goal in mind. What is your aspiration? And, for me, I always like the saying, when it's good, everyone's good. When it's bad, best people are good. And I think that's linking back into our top biller question, or our high performer question. The high performers, however negative they feel or however down they are, or whatever external factors are going on, they stay motivated, they remain motivated throughout. And I think it's staying motivated and knowing what your vision is, and even on your down days, making sure you're still aligned to that vision.
Just gonna sorry, clear the throat. That can be edited. Don't worry. Yeah. Okay, so along the way, I would assume there has been people around you, mentors, inspirational characters that have helped to shape or develop either you as an individual or the people around you. Who would you say has perhaps had the biggest impact on you as an individual?
I think probably my business partner, Imran. I like to use examples of people that are quite close to me, because you can you can see that tangible progression. Anyone external to that, for me, I can't see that progression. You hear they've done this, you hear they've done that, but you don't necessarily see it. Whereas with Imran, my business partner, he was my manager back in the day at our previous recruitment business. really pushed me to be a top performer and elevated me to top performing status, pushed me to become a manager, and then eventually became his business partner. And at the time, he had a very young family, so you're taking a risk naturally, leaving a senior managerial position within a very successful business to all of a sudden start a business with one other guy in, an office the size of my toilet, fingers crossed and hoping that it works out. And I think that's very inspirational. And I think that's an everyday person, taking that leap and taking that step to say, do you know what, I want something more. And it's a huge risk that I'm taking, but I'm going to try and go and get it. So I think, that's a bit of an inspiration for me, someone that I've seen grow, someone that's developed me, and someone that I've seen take a huge risk. And fortunately, that risk certainly isn't at the level that we want it to be yet, and we haven't succeeded to the level we want it to be yet, but it's succeeding, which is great to see, and it's a real good life example for me, and I find that quite inspirational.
You talk about long-term goals and where the potential bigger risks are. What does the journey look like for you? What's the end goal?
I think for us, we're trying to get to that step where we are outright market leader in Milton Keynes and the surrounding areas. I think, a lot of businesses, they very quickly try and go national and so on. I don't think that's our plan immediately. I think let's really master the local areas. Let's become that go-to brand. In the last 48 hours, we've had 2 brand new jobs called in from 2 brand new clients, which is great because we haven't business developed those. We haven't approached those, and they've just called us based on our market presence, based on our Google reviews, which is fantastic. So I think for us to be a household name locally, you think recruitment, you think EAC Consulting Group within Milton Keynes and the surrounding areas. That's the immediate aspiration. Then I think following that, should we succeed, which, I'm confident we will, we'll then branch out to other areas. But I think it's always important maybe to have a base in those other areas, so you can meet clients, you can meet candidates where necessary, and you can grow kind of offices. Even if there's a work from home split, you can still grow offices. But I think really mastering our local areas is our immediate kind of focus.
Yeah, it's an exciting future, and I think I can understand that because I'm on a very similar journey this end, and I think being able to have a clear focus and a path forward that you can kind of slowly move towards, whether that's through organic growth, natural growth, acquisition, and everything else. It's exciting. So we mentioned when we first started talking on the podcast about you kind of promote and you're a firm advocate for the consultative approach. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by I suppose the consultative approach as opposed to other approaches, certainly within sales and recruitment?
I think it's really kind of being the ultimate business partner for your clients and for your candidates. You're someone they can lean on. You're someone that's knowledgeable. You're someone that's a specialist within your field. We like to say we're not an agency, we're a consultancy. Which I think separates us from some, not all, because look, there's some very consultative recruiters out there that are great recruiters, but we're one of those that, look, we will advise our clients, we will guide our clients through the process. We'll really become, like I say, an extension of their business in helping them understand, right, okay, where's this function of your organization now for your sales team, for example? Where does it want to go? Okay. What are the plans over the next 12, 18, 2 years that you want to come to fruition? And how's the best way for us to support you with that? And quite often with our knowledgeable approach, our clients will call us, not to give us a job brief, but say, look, what do you think on this? What do you think on that? I'm considering doing this, which is really what we want to be. I've always had a keen interest in management consultancy, but I've always worked in recruitment. So I think giving that management consultancy edge where you really guide and support your clients, but also guide and support your candidates. What are your career goals? And is this role really going to fit it? Because if it's not going to fit in 6, 9, 12 months, you're going to leave, which, don't get me wrong, that's probably outside the rebate policy, but ultimately we want our candidates to last long term. So it's about understanding that client, guiding that client, but also understanding that candidate and guiding that candidate throughout their career. And we quite often find that, I mean, there's some candidates over the last 4 years that we've placed a couple of times. You know, there's numerous examples we could give of that, because candidates enjoyed the experience. They found us very supportive. They come back to us for a bit of guidance. Where should I go next? And I think that's the difference from what I would maybe class an agency is. You take a job brief and you ping a load of CVs, whereas a consultancy really gets to know their client, gets under the skin of their client, you know, maybe provides a little bit of advice if they feel market doesn't dictate that what they're looking for is feasible or is going to be achieved, and does the same on the flip side with the candidates.
It's so true, isn't it? And I think there's almost, within the recruitment industry, there's a tug of war between consultants being incentivized to place today, make a placement today because your target's for the end of the month. And that ability to have that consultative long-term approach where actually you might not place in the first month, 6 months, 12 months even, if not longer, because you're building up that business relationship where you are the extension of the brand, you are the go-to person. And quite often, they don't always go hand in hand in how recruiters are either managed, KPI'd or incentivized. Obviously, we all need to make money. We're in sales, so we've got to be governed by our return and our results. But I think quite often it's the long-term relationship that suffers because it's all about getting that placement sorted today. And I think in my experience, having recruited, taken on recruiters, grown regions and businesses, there's always that fight between how long do you give someone? Yes, I'm building great relationships. Yeah, but you haven't placed anyone yet. And that element where it's the fight between recruiter versus consultancy. But I love that. I'm a firm advocate of the way that you approach that and see that. And I think I've had conversations this week about how you build those high value clients. High value clients come from a consultative approach because they come back to you time and time again. Absolutely. Okay, so in terms of resources then, what have you kind of found around you that's enabled you to progress through the process relatively quickly? You mentioned within your bio about your dissertation on the artificial intelligence within recruitment. I mean, that is an area in a market that is growing exponentially. Yeah,
absolutely. I think really my aim for doing the MBA, which I did alongside work, so it was quite a busy period starting in 2018. Fortunately, my dissertation actually fell when we were on furlough and the office was a lot quieter, the business was a lot quieter. So fortunately, the 12,000 words that I had to do, I actually did with my head down rather than, speaking to this person and speaking to that person. But yeah, I think the MBA was massively influential because it kind of, I mean, one thing I hugely took from the MBA was, a lot of businesses are trying to be better, aren't they? They're trying to be better than their competitors. They're trying to do more. But what being better often does is you're copying someone else ultimately, and you're trying to beat what they're doing. Whereas I think what the MBA taught me is why be better when you can be different? Can completely change the complexion of the way that you look at things, which is where our consultative edge comes with. And don't get me wrong, that's not completely unique to us, but it's looking at how we can be different, not solely how we can be better. You mentioned about the dissertation on artificial intelligence within organizational branding within recruitment. And that was quite an interesting project because I looked at candidates, I looked at clients, I looked at recruiters, and I looked at those that weren't associated to the industry to see what their perspective was on artificial intelligence. Because let's be honest, as recruiters, they've probably been going on for the last 10 years about, right, this industry is going to be disruptive, it's going to be taken over by AI, and, you're all going to be made redundant. And I thought, it'd be interesting to do a project on that and see what people's thoughts are. And the results that came back were really quite interesting. People like artificial intelligence within recruitment at the start of the process, okay, at the start of the vetting process, from a candidate side to learn a little bit more, from a client side and a recruiter side for the candidate to be vetted a little bit before they come through to you. But they actually like dealing with a human after that first kind of initial process, which I think for us as recruiters is great. But that wasn't just recruiters saying that. This was quite a widespread study where it became evident that clients like that, candidates like that, those not associated to the recruitment industry, like dealing with people. And don't get me wrong, AI, tech is great. It really is great. And the opportunities that we've got now due to that, fantastic. But I think within the hiring process, my study certainly showed that it should be utilized at the start. But throughout the process, people like to be guided by a person. They like to feel the warm nature of a person and the fact that that person listens to their needs and wants and then tailors their approach to that, which sometimes is quite difficult with that AI approach. So very interesting study, to be honest, and really nice to get an external view, because us recruiters, we know what we want. We want to make sure we're staying in work, right? But it was good to see that there's certainly a place for it, but that place is to support the human nature of interaction.
Yeah, I mean, that poses a few questions running through my head now, and I'm sat there thinking AI is brilliant, and I think at the start of a process where it's perhaps pre-qualifying a bigger list to create a shorter list that I can then speak to, because ultimately good recruiters, great recruiters, are there because of their, I suppose, negotiation, the art of persuasion, and the ability to either sell a great opportunity or position or a great candidate and the value that they can bring to a company.
Yeah.
I think AI at those elements potentially can fall down because it's going to be a black and white discussion.
Yeah. And how many times, Steve, and I'm sure every recruiter that listens to this will be able to relate, how many times have we said to a client, look, I know this candidate doesn't meet your prerequisites, but just please trust me. I'm putting it on the line here. See this guy or this woman, you'll love them. Yeah. The client's like, okay, because it's come from you, I'll see them. And how many times have they been hired? You know, you don't put it on the line as a person unless you're confident, especially if you're good or a great recruiter. Whereas maybe using AI throughout that process would have certainly made that person unqualified for the job or not applicable for the job. Whereas, you know, that human touch allows you to say, look, trust me on this one, just see them. And so many times I've had clients come back to me, and I'm sure you've had clients come back to you to say, do you know what? I was not convinced, but they've come in, let's make them an offer. This person needs to work in the business.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? And a lot of what I do now, having recruited the same desk for 15 years, my personal goal is to get people interviews without having to send a CV. And it was always that from the start. I wanted to create a relationship where a phone call from me to a client or a candidate meant, A, they picked up and they listened, but ultimately they made a decision based on the information that I gave them, not the information that was put in front of them. And that's what I wanted, because that differentiates you from everybody else. And it's so important. And that would, for me anyway, remove the element of AI completely, because I just need to have the conversation because I know what I'm doing. And I think there's AI, it definitely has a place in recruitment. Recruitment is primed for some disruption of some sort, because in many ways, a lot of the way and processes that we work to is relatively archaic and hasn't changed since the 60s, 70s and 80s. And I think there's good things and there's bad things with AI. I imagine that dissertation was a really interesting project just to go through and find out the discussions. Okay, so within this podcast, we have a kind of plethora of people that listen, and predominantly it's a recruitment-based audience. And we'll have recruiters that are about to embark on their journey. We'll have recruiters that have been doing it for years and perhaps got to a point where they're plateauing and they've perhaps achieved top billing status, but they're now at a point where they think, well, what do I do now? What bits of advice would you give recruiters that are perhaps just starting out and thinking, okay, I've got to set my stall out. It's a blank canvas. Where do I start? What do I do? How do I approach it?
I think firstly, you know, look at kind of what your long-term vision is, what you want to achieve maybe over the next 12 months, because I think that's a realistic time for a trainee. So much is going to adapt and evolve within that first 12 months. To look outside of that, I think would be looking too far ahead. And, you know, your career could go in so many different directions. But think if you look at that 12-month period, what's your goal within 12 months? And then you work that plan back. What's your goal in 9 months? What's your goal in 6 months? What's your goal in 3 months? What's your goal in 1 month? What's your goal in 1 week? And I think if you're knowing what that ultimate goal is, but then working that goal back, you know the steps you need to take to achieve that. And quite often, if you do that well, you'll actually overachieve that goal. So I think it's been very clear in your mind what you want to achieve long term, and then how your short-term steps can support you in achieving that. Because it's so easy, isn't it? A training recruiter saying, right, okay, my first year, I want to bill £60,000. Okay, that's great. That's a good number. I'm sure most businesses would be like, look, if someone fresh to recruitment is billing £60,000 first year, good prospects for year 2 because they've built their foundations, built a client base. But how do they do that? And unless you're working that plan back, they're not going to know. And then I think it filters into what makes that high performer is being proactive day in, day out, however bad things get, which, moving into recruitment, we can both say, Steve, they get bad, really bad sometimes. And the second one is return on investment. Plan your days, structure your days, quickly try and work out what clients might waste your time, what candidates might waste your time, what clients, maybe they're on a slightly lower fee, but there's good volume there. Okay. And like you say, build those relationships. Don't look at those quick wins. One placement in your first week is great, but ultimately, if you don't do another placement for your first 3 months, it's not so good. But if you do 2 placements in your 3rd month, that's more. Yeah, you've come out the blocks quickly, but you're building those foundations, you're building those relationships. And that means once you get to that 60,000 at the end of year 1, because you've built the foundations, you've built those relationships, year 2, you've got a load of accounts to take into your next year that you can just build upon. Rather than if you're looking at those quick wins, you're constantly going to be building new accounts, building new relationships, which, let's be honest, is quite exhausting if you're doing that day in, day out.
It's so true, isn't it? And what advice would you give to consultants that, let's say they've been on a good run, they've done really well, maybe the pandemic has affected their market, their sales, their motivation, their mojo, and they've got to a point where they're feeling a little bit demotivated, and they're thinking, how am I ever going to start up again? I was doing so well, and then this pandemic's come and knocked me for 6. I've got to go back into work on Monday. What advice would you give them?
I think, again, you can use that kind of, 12, 24, 36 month plan, work it back. I always think that's beneficial because then you've got a goal and you know how to work it. But I think with top performing consultants or established consultants, what we like to do, and it's a very basic tool at EAC, is you do a SWOT analysis on ourselves. What are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are your opportunities, and what are your threats? And I think if you constantly do that as an iterative process, let's say once a month or even once a quarter, you're starting to understand where you're really excelling, where you're struggling, and you can take those weaknesses and make them strengths. You mentioned a pandemic. Let's look at the pandemic. That's a threat because it's an external factor, but it's actually also an opportunity. Like EAC, we've seen that as an opportunity, and I'm sure we're not the only other business that's really capitalized and thought, you know what, okay, time's really tough at the minute, but let's capitalize on this marketplace where competitors are quiet. So I think if you're constantly as an individual doing a iterative SWOT analysis on yourself, you'll understand, where your strengths align, where your weaknesses align, and hopefully turn those threats and weaknesses into strengths and opportunities. I think that's a really good way to see tangibly how you're progressing as an individual, month in, month out, quarter in, quarter out, but also to get you reflecting on, right, I need to really focus on these weaknesses to turn them into a positive and to turn them into a strength.
Yeah, I mean, self-evaluation is so important. I think recruitment being so fast-paced Monday to Friday, quite often you don't actually get the time to think, I need to go back and reassess how I've been working, what I've been doing, perhaps where things have fell down, areas where I've become lazy and I'm not doing as well as I used to. I think if there's people within that scenario, it's a good time to sit there and think, okay, come on, let's look at all the positives. Let's look at what I'm really good at, and let's try and improve the areas that I'm not so good at to make myself a little bit more all-rounded. It's good advice. So, okay, so if any of our listeners are interested in talking to you more and reaching out to you, where are they best to come and find you?
LinkedIn's a good place. Like many recruiters, I have LinkedIn up all day, every day, whether that be on the phone or the computer. So LinkedIn, Harry Alston, easy search. Office line at EAC, just go on the EAC website, give us a call if you need anything. Like I say, we're heavily recruiting at the minute, so anyone kind of within the Milton Keynes area looking for a role, give me a call. And yeah, outside of that, I think the EAC homepage on LinkedIn gives a really good snapshot of our business, what we stand for. So I'd recommend anyone having a little look at that, give that a little follow, and you'll certainly understand me and us as an organisation a lot more.
That is fantastic. I want to extend a huge thank you for spending some time with me today. I've really enjoyed chatting to you, and I'm sure our listeners will have lots of value from the content that you've shared. So thank you very much for that. What I always like to do as part of this podcast is ask you for that one single piece of advice that you would give anybody that's listening, really, perhaps that one bit of advice that has perhaps had the biggest impact on you over your life and your career. What would you say at that point?
I think I thought about this question before we came on. I think it's a difficult one, but I think based on how this conversation's gone, I think a really good bit of advice for anyone is to, in the face of adversity, see opportunity. The pandemic's a great example. If there's adversity there, we all feel down, we all feel worried, but how can you capitalize on that adversity and turn it into a strength? So I think for me, don't be panicked, don't be nerved by adversity or things going wrong. Use that as a catalyst to change and become better. So I think for me, advice I would have given myself is, look, don't worry when things go wrong. This is your opportunity to make things better and even better than they were before.
What an ending. I love that. Great advice. And thank you again for spending some time with me.
Lovely. Top man. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.